Created an app called Ultimate Nurse to showcase a nurse profile, including work history and certifications. I'm using a local JSON server with a db.json file that I've already filled out with information to use here. I'm using React Router version 6. So here at the top level, wrapping my app component with browser router. In my app, I'm using the use effect hook to fire off 2 GET requests on initial page render with an empty dependency array, and then using use state for my history and certification state, which is set after these GET requests. I have 2 different post requests, which also render state pessimistically. After a successful post request, they receive objects passed up via callback functions from the history and cert form components. I pass down this history and certification data via props here, as well as those callback functions here. I use routes and route here for 3 different routes, home, work history, and certifications. The navbar component is outside of those routes. That includes nav links to those 3 different routes. The bio component isn't dynamic, just meant to serve as a home page. The history component also has its own state to toggle visibility of the history form. That state is set in the on-click event listener for a button that's rendered on that page, which is below the display of the history cards. So I use this history display variable to encompass the return of mapping through the history objects passed down, and then creating a history card for each one. Also pass down that add history callback function. In the history card, I destructure the history object passed down, and then use those properties to render the cards there. In the history form component, I use a controlled form. So I start off with this object of empty strings to set the original state. Each input has its own value that corresponds with that object. A handle change event listener with on change written here, and then a name attributes. That name and value are used in handle change to destructure and use a spread operator and set form object and merge in that new name and value. And then handle submit for the form prevents the page refresh, passes up the form object with the pass down callback add history, and then resets the form object states with the initial object. The certifications, cert form, and cert card are all the same as the history ones, just with different information. And then for styling, I just use index CSS with class names and elements for button, form, and input, and then class names for container and card, and active styling for navbar.